Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. This 5-4 split, to my eye, does seem to reveal that at least a couple of these conservative justices are prudentialists and institutionalists. But to the point that Colin is making, Bill, it seems to me that it's not clear that this is not going to work in Donald Trump's favor in the end if he has confidence and his legal team have confidence in these other grounds for appeal of the verdict itself. Why I say that is because those kinds of things could not really get litigated until the sentence was over. And so if the sentence had been put on hold by the Supreme Court, if Trump had taken office, if New York State had tried to say we're going to hold the sentence in abeyance until 2029, you would have years of Democrats and Trump critics and Alvin Bragg, his supporters, saying that this was a meritorious case and we won a jury verdict, we won a guilty verdict, and then Trump beat the clock. And what's interesting about this now, this twist is that now that Trump has been sentenced, obviously he didn't want to dial into this virtual court hearing in New York and get sentenced on these felony charges. But now that he has been, he has the opportunity to go to court and try to get vindication on the thing that we put a pin in earlier, and many other things, by the way, which is that the theory of the case was that these business records were falsified, and it was a felony because Trump was intending to also break federal campaign finance law, because the payoff to Stormy Daniels was a violation of federal campaign finance law. By the way, there's a former member of the Federal Election Commission, a chairman, who says that that is a misreading of federal campaign finance law. So the result of this sentencing on Friday might end up being some more litigation in the appeals courts, and maybe a year or two down the line, an appeals court will throw this out and say that Alvin Bragg was wrong on the law.
I think you're exactly right. That may be why Trump didn't have any criticism of the court's decision. The appeals, there's certainly a lot of grounds to appeals, and I don't want to know whether Trump would be fully vindicated or only in part, but many legal scholars think he has a real case because this was an aberrant prosecution. Whatever the law says, in this case, it really was an outrageous prosecution designed for political purposes, furthered in the courtroom by a judge that really did not look objective in a lot of ways. Trump usually went over the top in his criticism, but I think he has a case, and we'll see what the courts make of it later coming up. So I think you may be right that in the long run, it benefits him. If 2 years from now, for example, they find this whole thing was a misbegotten adventure.
Colin, we'll give you the last word, but what do you make of this as a political matter? I mean, do you agree with Bill that this will be pretty quickly forgotten? And remember, Trump was convicted of this by the jury in New York in late May of 2024. So that was months before the 2024 election, before the campaign between him and Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris even really got into full swing. So it seems to me it is hard not to conclude that voters have priced this into what they thought that they were probably going to be getting when they voted for Donald Trump and put him back in the Oval Office for another 4 years.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There's no question that voters priced this in, and that was part of the argument, certainly, that Trump's legal team was making as well, was that they had already looked at that and decided that on the merits of this, it was not really worth their time. And to Bill's point, obviously, I hope it will be forgotten. I hope he's correct about that. The effect of this decision is really to acknowledge that the trial was pointless, and I think that voters are going to look in the future and consider, was this really a productive use of the court's time or of the public's time for that matter? I don't think you need to be a Trump supporter to have serious doubts about the way this prosecution was handled and the precedent it sets for lawfare in general. I don't think any of us have forgotten that the case was brought after Trump announced that he was running for re-election. So it looked bad from the start. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Supreme Court resolves it on the merits going forward.
Thank you, Colin and Bill. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.